Sarah's lips, glistening under the neon beer sign, found Dale Swanson's with a practiced ease I'd never witnessed. My hand, holding two pitchers, trembled, spilling cold foam onto the polished wood floor. Dale just smirked over her shoulder. "Looks like your delivery boy's here, Sarah," he chuckled, his eyes holding mine, a silent challenge. My gut twisted. The phone screamed at 7 a.m., a raw, metallic sound that yanked me from a dreamless sleep. My hand fumbled for the receiver, knocking a half-empty glass of water onto the nightstand. It was Officer Miller, his voice flat, professional. "The tap room," he said. "Looks like someone paid you an unscheduled visit." My stomach tightened. An unscheduled visit was never good. I swung my legs out of bed, the cold floor biting at my feet. The thought of coffee was quickly replaced by a dull dread. I pulled on a pair of jeans and a work shirt, heading for the garage. My old Ford F-150, reliable as a sunset, sat there with a tire as flat as yesterday's beer. A nail, thick and rusty, gleamed defiantly in the rubber. This was not how Saturday was supposed to begin. I sighed, then grabbed Sarah Caldwell's keys from the hook. Her company car, a sensible, silver sedan, always had air in its tires. Saturday or not, it would get me there. The drive across town was short but cold. A biting wind whipped fallen leaves across the empty streets. When I arrived, the scene was worse than Miller's monotone description. The front door, thick oak and reinforced steel, was gone. Not broken, not pried, but gone. It looked like a small truck had driven right through it. Shards of glass glittered across the entrance, crunching under my boots as I stepped inside. The air in the bar was frigid, the warmth sucked out with the morning light. Empty shelves gaped where premium liquor bottles had once stood. A quick survey confirmed their efficiency. They had hit the high-dollar stuff, ignored the cheaper brands. Miller was already taking notes, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Insurance will cover it," he said, reading my thoughts. "Mostly. Still a damn headache." I nodded. A headache, yes, but not a disaster. My mind was already calculating deductibles and repair schedules. I spent another hour with Miller, giving statements, signing forms. The whole ordeal felt distant, like watching someone else's problem unfold on a TV screen. As I finally walked back to Sarah Caldwell's silver sedan, turning the collar of my jacket up against the wind, a voice cut through the quiet. Sarah, wait!" A man, tall and broad-shouldered, stood by a dark pickup truck parked down the street, waving a hand. He started walking toward me, a smile stretching across his face. He was in his late 30s, early 40s, dressed in crisp, expensive-looking, casual clothes. His eyes, however, snapped wide when he got closer and saw my face behind the wheel. The smile vanished. He mumbled something unintelligible, his face flushing crimson, and quickly shuffled back to his truck, disappearing around the corner with a nervous urgency. The encounter left a faint, unsettling prickle on my neck. Later that morning back home, I found Sarah Caldwell making coffee. The aroma filled the kitchen, a welcome contrast to the stale beer smell I'd carried home. "Someone called out your name at the bar," I said, leaning against the counter, watching her pour. "A guy. He mistook my car for yours, then looked pretty embarrassed." She just shrugged, stirring sugar into her mug. "Must have been someone else," she replied, her gaze fixed on the steam rising from her cup. Her tone was flat, disinterested. The brief, unsettling prickle returned, then faded. I spent the afternoon fixing the flat on my F-150, my hands grimy with grease and road dust. Afterward, I drove to the hardware store, then to a men's clothing shop. I bought a few plain, unadorned shirts and a new razor. Back home, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, I stared at my reflection. 12 years. That's how long it had been since I'd seen my own chin. The razor felt cold against my skin, scraping away the familiar beard, revealing a face thinner, sharper, etched with lines I hadn't noticed. The man in the mirror was a stranger, yet intimately familiar. Sarah Caldwell left a note on the kitchen counter around 5. "Gone shopping," it read, her neat script looping across the paper. "Back later." My usual Friday and Saturday nights involved scouting new bars, checking out the competition, learning what worked and what didn't. It was part of the job, a necessary evil for any owner in the business. Tonight felt different. I picked up the keys to a rental, a plain white Ford sedan, anonymous and unassuming, the kind of car you forget the moment it drives past. I started my rounds, moving from one brightly lit establishment to another, sipping a single beer, observing. Each place had its own rhythm, its own clientele. 6 bars came and went, each offering nothing but the usual hum of conversation and clinking glasses. By the time I reached the 7th, the New City Jack, nestled by the river, the air had grown heavy with the promise of rain. Its neon sign flickered, a promise of cheap drinks and loud music. I pushed through the door, and then I saw her, Sarah Caldwell. She was on the small dance floor, moving close with a man whose face, even in the dim light, was undeniably familiar. The same broad shoulders, the same expensive, casual clothes. The man who had called out, "Sarah, wait!" this morning. My gut twisted, a cold, hard knot tightening in my stomach. She was wearing something I'd never seen before, a low-cut white dress, tight, clinging to her figure in a way that screamed for attention. I slipped past the main crowd, finding an empty stool at a corner table where a few regulars were nursing their drinks. A redhead with a friendly face glanced my way. "Slow night," I offered, nodding towards the dance floor. "Who's the lady in white? She really knows how to move." The redhead smiled, taking a sip of her beer. "That's Sarah Caldwell," she said, nodding towards my wife. "And that's Dale Swanson, her boss. They're regulars here, especially since her husband works out of town so much." The redhead, Annie Miller, leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Dale's single, always has been, as far as I know. Sarah Caldwell, well, she says it's complicated, but they're always together here. Every Friday, every Saturday." She took another sip of beer, her eyes meeting mine, then glancing back at the dance floor where Sarah Caldwell was now laughing, her head thrown back, a sound I hadn't heard from her in years. "Comes in her own car, too," Annie added. "Parks it right out front." The cold knot in my gut tightened, twisting into something sharper. I excused myself, mumbling something about needing fresh air. The chill outside was a welcome shock. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from a tremor that had started deep inside my chest. I walked toward the parking lot, my eyes scanning for Sarah Caldwell's silver sedan. There it was, reflecting the dull glow of the streetlights. My rental, the white Ford, was parked a few spots down. I knelt beside the front driver's side tire, fumbling in my pocket for the small, metal stem puller I always carried. The hiss of escaping air was a small, satisfying sound in the quiet night. I moved to the next tire. "You didn't know, did you, Caleb?" Annie Miller's voice, calm and clear, cut through the darkness. I froze, my hand still on the valve stem. I slowly stood, turning to face her. She was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, a knowing sadness in her eyes. "I work with them both at the clinic," she said, her gaze steady. "Saw the look in your eyes, the way you watched her all night. It was pretty obvious." She paused, then added, "You don't work on oil rigs, do you?" The question hung in the air, a final confirmation of the elaborate lie I hadn't even known was being told. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "No," I said, my voice hoarse. "My bar got trashed this morning. Broken into. Sarah Caldwell thinks I'm still dealing with that, doing paperwork. I told her I was checking out the competition, undercover, learning the ropes." It sounded pathetic, even to my own ears. A flimsy cover for a man stumbling into a nightmare. Annie nodded slowly, her eyes not leaving mine. "Get in," she said, pulling a set of keys from her pocket and tossing them to me. They jingled softly in the night. "My car's just over there, the red Camry. Really don't want you on my radar in case someone else catches me talking to you?" "Not tonight." The practical edge in her voice was a lifeline. I didn't argue. I got in, my mind a blur of disconnected thoughts. The drive was short, maybe 15 minutes, past the edge of town, through fields of dormant corn, until we reached a small cluster of modular homes. Annie pulled into the driveway of one, its porch light a single yellow beacon in the darkness. Another car, a beaten-up Dodge Neon, was already parked there. "Brenda Jensen's," Annie explained, nodding towards the Neon. "She drove me tonight. Makes it easier to brush off unwanted attention from guys in the bar. Everyone knows Brenda just drops me off and waits." Inside, the home was tidy, smelling faintly of potpourri and old coffee. Annie gestured to a worn armchair. Sit down, Caleb. She poured us both glasses of water from the tap, the sound echoing in the sudden quiet. Dale Swanson, she began, her voice low. He's got a monthly room at the Rada Inn. It's just off the highway, about 5 miles south. They go there after the bar closes. Every Friday, every Saturday. She set the water glass in front of me. Sarah Caldwell, she'll come in, usually in her jeans, carrying a small bag. She'll change into one of those low-cut dresses, like the one she's wearing tonight. Then she and Dale leave together. She'll be back a few hours later, around 3 a.m. or so, in her jeans again, freshly washed, if you catch my drift. My hands tightened around the glass. How long? I managed to ask, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. Annie sighed, running a hand through her red hair. My brother Mike Miller, he's a night manager at the Rada Inn. We talk. He sees things. He figured out it's been going on for over a year now. He mentioned it to me a while back, said Sarah Caldwell told him you worked on oil rigs, away for months at a time. Made him think you two had some kind of open relationship, that you were fine with it. The water in the glass trembled in my hand. Oil rigs, an open relationship. The lies unfurled, thread by thread, in the quiet, sterile air of Annie's living room. Each word was a cold, precise cut. The air in Annie's living room felt heavy, suffocating. I gripped the water glass, my knuckles white. Proof, I said, the word a rasp in my throat. I need proof, and then there's the $20,000 I still owe her parents for the bar. Sarah Caldwell arranged the loan. I don't want to lose everything. The financial burden, a practical weight, pressed down, almost as heavy as the emotional one. Annie nodded slowly. My brother Mike Miller, he's pretty tight-lipped about guest information, but he's family. He'll be at our parents' anniversary dinner tomorrow night. I can talk to him, see if he can look into hotel video footage, key card records, anything that puts them together officially. She pulled out her phone. Give me your number. I'll call you after I talk to him. We swapped numbers, the exchange a small, firm act of alliance in the swirling chaos. I drove back to the New City Jack, my plain white rental blending into the dark street. I parked far enough away to watch without being seen, the engine idling softly. I wanted to see their reaction. Wanted to see them discover the flat tires. A morbid curiosity, a need to witness the consequence of my small, defiant act. It wasn't long before they emerged, the bar's neon sign casting a garish glow on their entwined figures. Sarah Caldwell was laughing again, a sound that now grated on my nerves. Dale Swanson had his arm around her waist. They stopped just outside the door, sharing a furtive, lingering kiss before he pulled out a set of keys, not for his truck, but for her silver sedan. He walked around, opening the passenger door for her, a gesture of chivalry I hadn't seen from him in the past 5 years. The sight cut deeper than I expected. Not just the kiss, but the casual intimacy, the way he opened her door, the normalcy of it all. It spoke of a routine, of a comfort built on lies. The brazenness of their deceit was a fresh wave of sick realization. They walked to her car, arm in arm, and then paused. Dale Swanson bent down, peering at the deflated tire. Sarah Caldwell's laugh died, replaced by a frustrated sigh. They exchanged words I couldn't hear, but the shrug of Dale Swanson's shoulders and Sarah Caldwell's exasperated expression were clear enough. He pulled out his phone, already making a call for a tow. I watched for another 10 minutes until the anger, cold and steady, became enough. I drove away. The next afternoon, Annie called. Her voice was guarded. Mike Miller says Sarah Caldwell has her own key card to Dale Swanson's room. She checked in with him, or sometimes just lets herself in after he's already there. So, no specific video of her checking in, but the key card records confirm her access to his room regularly. He also said she often used your oil rig schedule as an excuse to extend their stays, turning a one-night affair into a weekend-long rendezvous. The details, clinical and precise, painted a stark picture of premeditation. She wasn't just impulsive, she was calculating. A few days later, an anonymous email landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "Concerned employee." The message, short and to the point, claimed Sarah Caldwell was using company funds for suspicious business expenses. It didn't offer details, just a warning. It felt like a small, cold hand reaching out from the shadows. I started digging, discreetly. Sarah Caldwell's office was in our home, a converted spare bedroom. She kept her work files locked, but I had a spare key. I waited until she was out, ostensibly running errands. I went through her expense reports, a tedious stack of papers detailing meals, travel, client entertainment. At first, nothing jumped out. Everything seemed legitimate. But then I noticed a pattern. Several charges for the Rada Inn, disguised under various client codes. Small amounts, easy to overlook. Too many of them. I knew a junior employee at Sarah Caldwell's company, a young man named Kevin, who sometimes came over for poker nights. He was nervous, always trying to please. I cornered him one evening after work, catching him as he left the office. We stood under the harsh fluorescent lights of the parking garage. "Kevin," I started, keeping my voice low, steady. "I've been looking at some of Sarah Caldwell's expense reports, specifically some travel claims." His face went pale. He stammered, avoided my eyes. "Just tell me," I pressed. "Are you covering for her? Are you aware of any false claims?" He cracked. The pressure was too much for him. He confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "She asked me to adjust some travel claims. Say she was at a conference when she wasn't. It was just a few times, for a few hours. Nothing big, just to cover some time away. She called them personal appointments." His eyes darted around, afraid of being seen. "She said it was for her marriage, to save it." He handed me a folded manila envelope. "These are copies of some of the questionable reports and a few receipts for the Rada Inn." Inside the envelope, along with the expense reports, were credit card statements. They showed charges for expensive watches, a custom-made fishing rod, and a leather briefcase, all disguised as personal items or gifts for a relative. But I knew Dale Swanson was an avid fisherman, and he always carried a fancy briefcase. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just my marriage she was destroying, it was my financial stability, my future. The betrayal wasn't just romantic, it was a calculated financial exploitation that struck at the very foundation of my life. The stack of papers in my hand felt heavy, each receipt and statement a solid piece of undeniable evidence. I knew it was time to confront Sarah Caldwell. But I couldn't just throw it at her, not yet. The $20,000 loan still owed to her parents loomed large. It was a complication, a lever I couldn't afford to ignore. If I burned her completely, her parents might come after me, jeopardizing everything I had built. My strategy needed to be surgical, not a scorched earth campaign. I met Annie and Mike Miller at a quiet diner on the edge of town. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a pale glow on our faces. I laid out the expense reports, the Rada Inn receipts, the credit card statements for Dale Swanson's gifts. Mike Miller, usually stoic, leaned forward, his brows furrowed in a deep frown. "She's been stealing from her company to fund this," he stated, his voice tight with disgust. "That's not just an affair, Caleb. That's fraud." His reaction was a grim validation. Mike Miller tapped a finger on one of the expense reports. "You can't just drop the affair on her parents. Not first. They'll just defend her, especially with you owing them money. You need to hint at this first," he gestured to the financial documents. "Her recklessness with company money. Make them worry about her judgment. Then, when they're already off balance, that's when you bring up the rest." His advice was cold, calculated, and made perfect, brutal sense. I went home, the weight of the evidence still in my bag. I waited for the right moment. Not in the heat of an argument, not after a long day. I waited for a calm evening. A Friday, ironically, when Sarah Caldwell was home, relaxing, least expecting a storm. She was reading a magazine on the sofa, a glass of wine beside her, the television murmuring in the background. "Sarah," I began, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I walked to the coffee table and placed a single expense report, one of the more glaring ones, right on top of her magazine. "We need to talk about your work trips." She looked up, a faint smile on her lips, annoyed at the interruption. "Caleb, not now. I'm trying to relax. What about my work trips?" She reached for the report, her hand brushing it dismissively, but as her eyes scanned the lines, the date, the destination, the smile faltered. Her face slowly, steadily, drained of color. I didn't let up. This one, for instance, a conference in Chicago, 3 days, 2 nights at the Rada Inn. Only the conference wasn't in Chicago that week. It was in Des Moines, and the Rada Inn is 5 miles from here, not Chicago. I laid out another, then another, each one a thread in a widening web. And these credit card statements for a fishing rod, a watch, a briefcase, classified as personal items. But I know Dale Swanson just got all those things. She tried to brush it off, her voice cracking. That's ridiculous, Caleb. I don't know what you're talking about. Then as I continued to lay out the evidence, she switched to deflection. You've been spying on me, haven't you? Going through my things? How dare you? But her voice lacked conviction. The certainty in my gaze, the physical evidence spread before her, rendered her arguments hollow. Then I delivered the final blows. The hotel keycard records, Sarah Caldwell. Mike Miller, Annie's brother, he's a night manager at the Rada Inn. He confirmed you have your own key card to Dale Swanson's room. Every Friday, every Saturday, and all those oil rig trips I'm supposedly on, you use them to plan extended weekends with him. I paused, letting the silence hang, heavy with her exposed lies. And Dale Swanson? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet it seemed to echo in the quiet room. What about him? Her composure, carefully constructed over months, years, shattered completely. She stared at the papers, at my face, then down at her hands. A strangled sob escaped her lips, and she covered her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. But as I watched her, her shoulders shaking, I felt no pity. Her tears felt less like genuine remorse for what she had done to me, and more like self-pity for being caught. I want a divorce, I stated, my voice unwavering. And if you fight me over the bar, if you try to take any of it, I will expose every single one of these financial misdeeds. To your company, to the police. I watched her flinch. You cooperate quietly, Sarah Caldwell, or you face total ruin. Your guerbel, your reputation, your future. And your parents, they'll find out everything about Dale, about the money, all of it. She collapsed back into the sofa, the magazine and papers scattering around her. Her sobs grew louder, but they were muffled, defeated. The silence in the room stretched, heavy with the weight of her unraveling. My part was done for now. The news of our impending divorce, whispers of Sarah Caldwell's affair clinging to it like burrs, spread through our tight-knit Midwestern town faster than a prairie fire. It wasn't loud gossip, but the kind that hummed beneath every conversation, a shared understanding without needing explicit words. My still-repaired bar, the tap room, with its newly reinforced entrance, became a quiet testament to my struggle. It drew a mix of sympathetic glances and intensely curious stares from patrons who seemed to be looking for clues in the freshly painted walls. George and Martha Caldwell, Sarah Caldwell's parents, were livid. Not just about the affair, though that certainly fueled their outrage, but about the damage to their family name. The revelation of Sarah Caldwell's financial misdeeds at work, the fraud, that was the truly unforgivable sin in their eyes. George, a man who built his reputation on honesty and hard work, called Sarah Caldwell. His words, though few, were firm and unforgiving. He demanded she repay my $20,000 loan immediately. If she didn't, he told her, he would disinherit her, cutting her off entirely. He was a man of his word. Cornered, humiliated, in facing the wrath of her parents, Sarah Caldwell lashed out at me. She called, her voice shrill with anger and self-pity, accusing me of maliciously destroying her life. "You set this all up, didn't you, Caleb?" she screamed into the phone. "You wanted to ruin me." I listened, my grip on the receiver tight, saying nothing. Her accusations felt hollow, the desperate flailing of someone caught in their own trap. Meanwhile, Dale Swanson was experiencing his own fallout. Anonymous tips, undoubtedly from Mike Miller, quietly fulfilling his promise, had launched an internal investigation at his company. His carefully constructed professional reputation in town, once solid, began to crumble. Business contacts started returning his calls less frequently. Deals slipped away. I heard he was desperately trying to cut ties with Sarah Caldwell, but it was too late. Their foundation of secrecy couldn't withstand the public scrutiny. His growing isolation was almost palpable. Strangely, amidst the whispers and the tension, I found myself garnering a quiet respect. People in town, the regulars at the bar, the hardware store owner, the mechanic, they'd nod at me, a silent acknowledgement of my stoic handling of the situation. I hadn't made a public spectacle, hadn't aired our dirty laundry on social media. I had simply dealt with it, choosing dignity over drama, and that resonated in our community. Annie and Mike Miller remained steadfast allies. Annie would sometimes stop by the bar offering practical advice or just a quiet presence. Mike Miller would occasionally pass along more insights, piecing together Dale Swanson and Sarah Caldwell's pattern of deception. Brenda Jensen, Annie's friend, backed me too, recalling Sarah Caldwell's earlier overly flirtatious behavior at gatherings, a detail that now clicked into place for her. Yet despite the quiet support, the immense stress began to take its toll. Sleep became a luxury, stolen in short, fitful bursts. A pervasive, bone-deep weariness settled into my bones, a constant companion. My hands, once steady, sometimes trembled. I channeled my anger and frustration into work, into the physical labor of running and renovating the bar. I oversaw every detail of the repairs myself, from replacing the shattered door to patching drywall, finding grim solace in the sheer effort, the sweat, the tangible results of my own two hands. It was a way to keep moving forward, to rebuild what was broken, one nail at a time. If you stick around to the end, you'll see how life's costly choices unfold. Sarah Caldwell made a few attempts at reconciliation, or perhaps negotiation, over the next few weeks. Short, clipped text messages, then a phone call, her voice softer, almost pleading. But my resolve was cold, impenetrable. The trust was beyond repair. There was nothing left to negotiate, nothing to reconcile. The only path forward was separate. Dale Swanson, feeling the intense pressure of his crumbling life, made a few clumsy attempts to salvage things with Sarah Caldwell. But their entire relationship had been built on secrecy, on the illusion of what they could get away with. With that illusion shattered, exposed to the harsh light of public scrutiny, it withered and died. The divorce proceedings began with a grim formality, but quickly devolved into a bitter, drawn-out fight. Sarah Caldwell, still stung by her parents' demands and their dwindling support, decided to dig in. Prodded by Martha, who still hoped to salvage some financial standing, she sought a hefty settlement, claiming emotional distress and attempting to paint herself as the wrong party. My lawyer, Tom Peterson, was a shrewd local attorney, known for his calm demeanor and meticulous preparation. He guided me through the intricacies of marital assets, shared property, and the precarious ownership of the tap room, my sole investment. Sarah Caldwell's legal team, clearly out of their depth against Tom's calm persistence, tried to portray me as a paranoid, jealous husband who had illegally spied on his wife. They argued that my initial actions, the beard, the bar scouting, were proof of my obsessive nature. Tom just sat there, listening patiently, occasionally scribbling notes. When it was our turn, he methodically laid out my meticulously gathered evidence: the expense reports, the RADA-in receipts, the credit card statements, detailing Dale Swanson's gifts. He submitted Mike Miller's sworn affidavit regarding the key card access and the oil rig lies. Sarah Caldwell's case, built on flimsy accusations and denial, became almost impossible to defend. Adding to my troubles, a new, unforeseen permitting issue further delayed the taproom's reopening. A city inspector found a minor code violation from the original construction, requiring a costly upgrade to the fire suppression system. It was a bureaucratic nightmare, another layer of financial strain and frustration piled onto an already overwhelming situation. As the legal costs mounted, Sarah Caldwell's parents, George and Martha Caldwell, began to pull back their financial and emotional support. George, disgusted by the fraud charges, saw no point in throwing good money after bad. Martha, realizing the extent of Sarah Caldwell's deception and the damage it was doing to her own reputation in town, started making excuses to avoid her daughter's calls. The phone calls from Sarah Caldwell grew less frequent, her desperation more pronounced. Through the local grapevine, I heard that Dale Swanson had been quietly dismissed from his company. His career in town was effectively over. He was making plans to leave, to move to a larger city, hoping to restart elsewhere. Then came the news that he was selling his house, not just selling, but at a significant loss, a tangible marker of the wreckage he'd left behind. The consequences were catching up to him, too. Then a crucial piece of evidence surfaced. Tom Peterson received an anonymous tip, a digital file. It was an old voicemail from Sarah Caldwell to Dale Swanson, accidentally saved on a company server that Kevin, the junior employee, had stumbled upon while cleaning out old files. The voicemail, muffled but clear, explicitly detailed their scheme to hide the affair from her parents and her company. "Just tell them you were at that conference in Chicago," Sarah Caldwell's voice whispered. "Caleb will be away, so it's the perfect cover for us. We'll just say we extended the trip for networking." It was undeniable. This voicemail proved decisive, laying bare Sarah Caldwell's deliberate intent to deceive, not just me, but everyone. Sarah Caldwell's legal team tried one last desperate maneuver. They again attempted to use my initial deception, shaving my beard, scouting bars, against me, arguing it showed malicious intent. But the court, seeing the mountain of evidence against her, recognized my actions as a reaction, not a provocation. A desperate man trying to understand what was happening to his life, not a schemer. A fleeting pang of sadness did surface sometimes, a ghost of the marriage that was, the memories of a life I thought we were building together. But the overwhelming bone-deep sense of betrayal quickly quashed any regret for my actions. There was no going back. The combined strain of the divorce and the bar's stalled repairs pushed me to my emotional and physical limits. There were days I felt like I was running on fumes, each breath a conscious effort. But the need to protect my future, my livelihood, kept me going. Mike Miller, true to his word, provided a detailed account of Dale Swanson and Sarah Caldwell's regular pattern at the Rada Inn, a meticulous log of dates and times, cementing my claims. He spoke with a quiet authority that left no room for doubt. The evidence was irrefutable. Against all odds, I pushed through the bureaucratic mire. The fire suppression system was installed, the permits approved. My bar, now proudly renamed The Crossroads, finally reopened. The shattered door had been replaced with a sturdy oak one, emblazoned with a new hand-painted sign. The interior felt fresh, resilient, a tangible reflection of my own renewed determination. The community, observing my quiet struggle and steadfast rebuild, seemed to embrace the Crossroads as a symbol of endurance. New patrons, curious and supportive, came in. Old regulars returned with a renewed sense of local spirit. The place buzzed with life, a warm, inviting hum that filled the nights. Clean-shaven, sharper in my movements and clearer in my thoughts, I dedicated myself entirely to the bar. Every detail, from the beer taps to the daily specials, had my personal touch. I found a new purpose in rebuilding my shattered life, brick by brick, drink by drink. The long hours, the physical work, the constant interaction with customers, it all grounded me. My finances, slowly but surely, began to stabilize as the Crossroads thrived. The loan to Sarah Caldwell's parents, the lingering financial tether, was settled as part of the divorce decree. It was a clean break, a relief I hadn't realized I was carrying until it was gone. In a quiet, almost hushed moment after the divorce was finalized, George and Martha Caldwell approached me. George, his face lined with an unspoken weariness, simply said, "Caleb, we're sorry for what you went through. We know she wronged you." Martha, her eyes red-rimmed, nodded her agreement. It was a small but significant validation, a quiet acknowledgement that the truth had been seen, and I had been exonerated. It didn't heal all the wounds, but it offered a measure of peace. Sarah Caldwell, on the other hand, found herself isolated and jobless. Her reputation, damaged by the financial fraud and the affair, preceded her. She struggled to find work in town, each attempt met with polite rejections and averted gazes. The life she had built here, like mine, was shattered, but hers was by her own hand. Dale Swanson left town for good, a forgotten figure. His Midwestern chapter closed in disgrace. I heard he'd moved to a city far away, trying to bury his past. He became a cautionary tale, a ghost in the collective memory of the community. Finally, the official document arrived, the final divorce decree. It was a thin envelope containing a few sheets of paper, but it represented a somber yet definite end to a profoundly painful chapter of my life. I read it, signed it, and felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I reflected on the true cost of betrayal and the steep price of seeking justice. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing the truth prevail, in reclaiming my life. But it was mixed with the enduring ache of loss, a scar left by the years I had given, the trust I had invested. Annie Miller, who had been a rock through it all, became a steady, comforting presence in my life. First as a friend, stopping by after work, sharing late-night talks after the bar closed, then slowly as something more. I started to see her not just as an ally in my battle, but as someone who genuinely cared, someone who saw me, not just the wreckage I had survived. A tiny spark of hope, fragile but real, began to flicker within me. I knew I had to battle the lingering bitterness, the resentment that sometimes tried to creep back in. Holding on to anger, I realized, only kept me captive, tied to a past I needed to shed. Paying the price wasn't just for Sarah Caldwell and Dale Swanson. It was for me too, in the form of emotional scars and lost years, in the painful lessons learned. The crossroads transformed into more than just a business. It became a sanctuary, a place where I could mend and grow, one drink poured, one conversation shared, one hard-won day at a time. It was the physical manifestation of my resilience, a beacon of my new beginning. The weeks blurred into months, and with each passing day, Caleb and Annie's relationship slowly deepened. Our conversations shifted from shared grievances about the past to quiet dreams for the future, punctuated by comfortable silences. We'd spend evenings together, sometimes just sitting at the crossroads. After closing, the hum of the refrigerators and the distant street lights, our only company, watching the world outside settle into its quiet Midwestern rhythm. Annie, with her practical creativity, started lending a hand with the bar's marketing. She helped me brainstorm new ideas for happy hour specials, suggested local bands, and even designed a new flyer for our weekly trivia night. Her fresh energy was infectious, breathing even more life into the thriving bar. It wasn't just business. It was a shared endeavor, a quiet partnership forming. One evening after a particularly busy shift, I found myself tentatively inviting Annie to dinner. "There's a place about 20 miles out on the highway," I said, my voice feeling a little awkward. "Serves a decent steak." Well, it was a small step, a simple dinner, but it felt significant. It was a step beyond the established boundaries of our friendship, a foray into something new, something that hinted at a different future. I grappled with a mix of guilt and hope, accepting happiness, truly allowing myself to feel it, after such a profound period of loss and betrayal, felt almost disloyal to my past self. Was it too soon? Was I ready? Annie, sensing my hesitations, never pushed. She understood, silently acknowledging the past pain without ever needing to speak of it. Her patience was a balm. Brenda Jensen, Annie's friend, often came by the bar. I'd catch her observing us, a warm, approving smile on her face, a silent encouragement that spoke volumes. It felt good, the quiet backing of good people. I made a deliberate effort to let go of my lingering anger and bitterness. It was a conscious choice, a daily practice. I realized that holding on to that resentment was a burden, a heavy chain that kept me tethered to the past. It wasn't about forgiveness for Sarah Caldwell. It was about liberation for myself. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of Sarah Caldwell in town. She was walking out of the grocery store, her shoulders slumped, her once vibrant hair duller, her clothes plain. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. There were no words, no gestures, just a brief, wordless encounter that underscored the vast distance between us. She looked diminished. I felt a quiet, resolute peace. The anger was gone, replaced by an almost clinical observation. The town, having moved past the initial scandal, now saw me differently. Not as the cuckolded husband, but as a respected business owner, a man who had weathered a terrible storm and emerged on the other side. My name was no longer linked to scandal, but to resilience. I began to understand that true revenge was never about hurting Sarah Caldwell, never about orchestrating her downfall. It was about rising from the ashes, stronger and more authentic than before. It was about rebuilding, not just a business, but a life. I found comfort in the steady rhythms of Midwestern life, the predictable seasons, the familiar faces, cherishing genuine connections over fleeting drama. The Crossroads hosted a local charity event for the community food bank. It was a resounding success, raising more money than anyone expected. The place buzzed with goodwill and laughter, further cementing my place and reputation in the community. As I stood behind the bar, pouring drinks, talking to neighbors, I discovered a profound sense of quiet contentment, a hard-won peace that felt more real than anything I'd known before. The annual county fair rolled into town, bringing with it the smell of fried dough and livestock. Caleb and Annie went together, a simple, wholesome date that felt perfectly right, perfectly real. We rode the Ferris wheel, its gentle arc offering views of the whole town sparkling below, and shared a sticky bag of cotton candy. It was ordinary, unassuming, and in its very normalcy, deeply profound. We talked cautiously about our future, our voices low against the carnival's distant hum. We acknowledged the scars of the past, the lessons learned, the trust that had been irrevocably broken, but we also embraced the possibility of something real and lasting, a future built on honesty and quiet companionship. It wasn't grand, sweeping promises, but a steady, measured hope. Caleb took a deep pride in the Crossroads. It was more than just a business now. It was a thriving hub, a testament to his resilience and the sheer force of his will. He'd often stand behind the bar, watching the laughter and conversation, feeling a deep satisfaction that transcended profit margins. He even began mentoring a young employee, a kid just out of high school, passing on not just the mechanics of the business, but his hard-earned wisdom and commitment to community. Sarah Caldwell's parents, George and Martha Caldwell, occasionally visited the Crossroads for a quiet drink. They'd sit at a corner table, sometimes just watching, sometimes offering a small, sad smile. It was a subtle form of reconciliation, a silent acknowledgement of my enduring character. They didn't apologize again, and I didn't expect it. Their presence was enough. I often reflected on the complex nature of paying the price. It wasn't just Sarah Caldwell and Dale Swanson who bore the cost. It rippled outwards, affecting everyone, their families, our friends, even the town itself, and me. While I found a form of justice, the moral ambiguities of my actions, the elaborate deception to catch Sarah Caldwell, the quiet manipulation of her parents, were not without their own quiet weight. It was a victory, but one earned through uncomfortable means. The story concludes with Caleb and Annie standing on the porch of her modular home, the cool evening air carrying the scent of damp earth. We gazed out at the vast, unchanging Midwestern sky, a canvas of deep blues and purples. I felt a quiet sense of optimism, a feeling I hadn't thought possible mere months ago. I recognized that while some days you can't win, some days you can absolutely find a way to start all over again. I understood that life, like the wide-open prairie, held both harsh, biting winters and abundant, hopeful springs. The lingering echoes of betrayal were still there, faint and distant, but they were softened by the quiet hum of a new, authentic, life-taking root. I thought of the small triumphs, the genuine moments of connection, and the deep, abiding strength I found within myself, a strength forged in the crucible of betrayal. The past was now a lesson learned, not a prison. And the future, though never certain, was his to build, one slow, deliberate step at a time. I was no longer defined solely by the affair, by the wounds of the past, but by my enduring spirit, by my resilience. I looked forward to the next unwritten chapter, whatever it might hold. The final image, as the last light faded from the sky, was the subtle, comforting warmth of Annie's hand in mine, a quiet promise of shared horizons stretching out before us.